Kia ora tātou, everyone. Gosh, I have to say, this is fantastic to see everyone here. Welcome, everybody. If the alarm sounds, we all make our way to the nearest exit, which is probably the one at the back, and the assembly point is across the road, and await staff instructions. This meeting is being live streamed on the TCC website. So please be aware of that. You all know how to use the mics. They are actually quite sensitive. So like me, don't move your head around because then we lose your voices. Can I just remind everyone to turn their mobile phones either off or onto silence. Could I ask Te Taro to open with a karakia, please? Thank you very much. The way that the afternoon's going to run is we'll have three separate first of all, we'll have a presentation from Waka Kotahi, and then offer some time for questions. Then we will have three separate council meetings. So TCC will open their meeting, work on their agenda, close their meeting. Western Bay will open its meeting, do its agenda and close its meeting, and the same for the regional council. And then we will convene the smart growth meeting. So you've got all the heavy hitters sitting at the top of the table here, representing the councils and smart growth. So what we'll do, I think, is just go through the meeting procedures once, the standard procedures once. So I won't open the Tauranga meeting first. Do I have to open a meeting before? Call for apologies, or can we just get? Do you want to do that first? Okay. All right. Okay. So can we ask our representatives from Waka Kotahi? We have David Spears, our regional director, and we've got Jessie Andrews, and we've got Raylene. Would you like to come up to the table and do your presentation, please?
Kia ora koutou, ko Jess Andrew Takawanua. It's fantastic to be here today, and thank you so much for having us and for this occasion. It's a real privilege to be here. The point of this is just to give you a relatively short overview of the business case and the process to date and the next steps, and then answer questions as we go through. So next slide. Just wait for the next slide to come out. So Tauranga for Tomorrow has a broader program approach that has been taken to communicating in respect of our Tauranga works with our partners across your councils, and also Kāinga Ora and other stakeholders in the area. We've worked together with mana whenua as well to have a broader conversation with the community about the future of Tauranga in the Western Corridor and be able to give the community a holistic view of that. What we know is that by 2050, the Western Bay is going to be home to about 258,000 residents, and it's exceeded all growth predictions to date. And that creates a huge transport movement growth. We're looking at 1 million transport movements per day on our network, which is an enormous jump. Tauranga West is one of the large-scale urban developments proposed to support that growth across the Western Bay of Plenty, and in itself, that's looking to be 4,000 homes. And you'll all be aware that as a smart growth partnership, we're looking at significantly more growth up the remainder of the Western Corridor. The Tauranga Network Connections detailed business case that we're here for today is a long-term project that's been running for some time now to look at how we provide the right, safe and sustainable transport options to support that level of growth through the Western Corridor, including the growth in freight movements through there as well into the future. So the recommended option that's put forward in the business case delivers solutions that support urban growth in Tauranga West and the wider Western Corridor, provides choice in how people want to travel by providing quality travel across a range of modes. It protects that strategic freight route that's part of the Golden Triangle that connects the Port of Tauranga to Waikato and Auckland. It provides safety for all users, which is a really crucial aspect of the improvements we need to provide here. It also provides resilience and improves the environmental outcomes in the area from where we are now. The benefits of the investment are summarised here, looking across the transport outcomes that we're looking to achieve around resilience, inclusive access, health and safety, environmental sustainability, and economic prosperity. So the recommended option is summarised on the map there, and it concludes works being delivered across 4 stages. The reason that we've proposed staging is helps for the delivery of the program. It allows us to do that efficiently and to maximise how we integrate into the broader network, how we minimise the disruption on road users, especially where we're doing works on the existing roads. It reduces rework and manages costs. It ensures that we can deliver the improvements that are in proportion to what's needed at the particular time. You can see there, stage 1 is your route protection, so your resource management process where you put in place a protection over the land and obtain the consent to carry out the works. Stage 2 is in blue, and that's the replacement of the existing Manawa Bridge with a future-proofed bridge slightly up from the existing location and tied into the existing state highway, but that would be supporting the long-term alignment that would come in the future. Stage 3 is significant online improvements at Barks Corner, which is the connection of Cameron Road into State Highway 29, just by our Western Bay Council's office, and expands that State Highway 29 along there, significantly providing additional lanes with the bus lane priority through there, and then a significant signalised upgrade at what we call the toll road roundabout, so the roundabout outside the Crossings Mall, with improvements along the beginning of State Highway 36 there. That there provides significant capacity and reduces a huge amount of the congestion and the choke points that we're seeing on the network at the moment, and will provide a massively enhanced level of service, including allowing for kind of high frequency bus connections through between Tauranga and Te Papa Peninsula, walking and cycling connections, and much better travel experience for everyone, including much more reliable journeys for our freight. The 4th stage and the most significant stage is the provision of a new offline 4-lane expressway style state highway, starting with a new grade separated interchange behind the existing kind of Cambridge Road intersection there, and then running along through the new growth area with connections by the school and the new spine road that would be built into the growth area, and a new grade separated interchange at Redwood Lane, which would kind of integrate the roundabout that will be built at Redwood Lane as part of the upcoming enabling works. So you're seeing those stage over a number of years. The green stage 4 would be delivered based on when the need is and when that's triggered from a really active monitoring base. So our current prediction is that would start at about 2041, but the idea is to monitor the network really closely so that we're actually live monitoring when is it needed. We're not waiting for the need and reacting, we're actually getting ahead of that and providing it at the point that that need arises. So these provide you with a little bit more detail on each of those stages that I've just talked you through, from the Manawa Bridge, which is this one here, which shows how that sits next to the existing alignment and how that would tie back into the existing state highway. This gives you more detail on what we're calling the public transport prioritisation package, which is your 2 intersections at Barks Corner and the toll road, and and the improvements to Highway 29. And just the thing to add on that from what I said earlier is this unlocks significant additional growth. So this will provide the additional homes in Tauranga West beyond what we'll get through the enabling works. It unlocks the Keenan Road growth area, the Merrick Road urban growth areas, and it allows the Tauranga business estate to expand. So that provides you with, 10,500 additional dwellings in the Western Corridor. And the intention is that construction on that would start as soon as you've completed your consenting and property processes. So it's completing those and rolling straight into that. And then finally, just further detail there on stage 4, your offline state highway, and noting in that case that would unlock the remaining growth in the Western Corridor and provide for potential growth in Upper Balk, Merrick, Upper Joyce, and other areas that would be explored through other processes. So this provides you a little bit more detail on the land use triggers. As we noted, the enabling works, which are in the consenting process at the moment, and we're hoping to start construction this summer, will provide the first 2,000 homes. And then, as we've noted already, stage 3 will provide you that 10,500, and then the remainder from stage 4. This provides you with kind of a total of 30,000 dwellings in the Western Corridor from a transport perspective. This gives you a little bit more information on what we're calling the adaptive management approach. So that's what I mentioned earlier, saying we're not going to simply lock in a date for particularly stage 4 and then walk away and wait till that date arrives. We're going to put in place, I guess, a huge amount of monitoring technology, which will allow us to actually look at those lead indicators. How is traffic and how is growth trending? What are we actually seeing live? And when do we need to respond to this? So that means if, by 2031, we're seeing those indicators, we start having that conversation, then we don't wait till 2041 to react. And this is something, we're really proud of kind of taking that much more proactive approach, and that the technology has enabled us to have really high quality data that allows us to kind of get ahead and have the information we need to respond quickly and easily. So the next steps, it's worth reiterating today, is a step in a process. So today is really important in getting the endorsement from your councils, and that unanimous support from Smart Growth is really crucial. The Waka Kotahi board needs to now take your endorsement and take the business case and actually apply its investment decision-making process over top of that. And that will happen in our August board meeting, where they will consider that and make a final decision on endorsing the business case. The endorsement from the board will then allow us to put this into the National Land Transport Program going forward. So as most of you will be aware, the regional land transport programs are being developed at the moment. So this will feed into that process being run by the regional council, and will form part of also Waka Kotahi State Highway Investment Proposal. The NLTP for short is a 3-year program, but it has that 10-year view. So it'll be able to provide a view of what we're seeking immediate funding for, particularly the route protection and the bridge, but also forecasts out what we're looking at beyond that and allows us to signal the need there. And there's again another picture there, and we're happy to take questions from you on any aspect of that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If there was more funding available, would you be able to move faster than the program you've got up there? That's my first question.
So for the first 3 stages, they are phased effectively on delivery. There is a lot of work to do before we can start construction on particularly the 29A aspect. So that is as fast as is feasible when you take into account property acquisition and consenting. It's not constrained by funding. The final stage 4, could be delivered earlier if that was the wish of, funders.
I suppose, Madam Chair, my question is then to the group that when you go to Wellington, you'll actually be speaking with the opposition parties as well to make sure there's continuity, whatever happens after the next election. That's really quite important. And might I say, while I'm speaking with you, the people from Upper Kaimai, those intersections that have trouble getting on and off the road into those Old Kaimai Road, Soldiers Road, we're extremely grateful when you said you were prepared to meet with them. I think that's a road safety issue and something that should actually be monitored as we go along. Instead, Madam Chair, we've had to fight every time for any intersection upgrade, and there needs to be something more positive of a program as to how those intersections can, just as important as any other work that we actually do.
Hi, Councillor Crawford for Western Bay. Yeah, I was just the same question was, you know, delivery of speed. You obviously answered that it's phased and it's, yeah, so that answered that. Thank you.
Kia ora. Do you mind just running us through the improved environmental outcomes?
Yeah, so I guess at the moment that state highway corridor does not have any stormwater treatment on it. So by upgrading that through the enabling works package and through this package, you'll see, you know, that sort of treatment up to the required standards. There will also be quite a bit of restoration in the Kapuroa Valley. We have heard from our hapu reps that they would like that stream realigned and naturalised. So we have captured that as best we can within the corridor as well.
Kia ora. And if I might just ask one more. So acknowledges there's increased CO2 emissions. My fear is if there's constraint in budgets that the walking and cycling priority and rapid transit bus corridors could be marginalised. Are you 100% secure that it won't happen unless we've got this multi-mode sort of really world-class multi-mode?
I think it's really integrated into the program. So it's built into the program. It's not simply an add-on or a tack-on. So I think at this point, you know, we feel really confident that it's a crucial part of the package, and that the staging also supports that. Providing those bus priority as the first stage also drives that behaviour change in those practices. If you build houses there and you only provide car access, then people will drive their car. If you provide high quality bus from day one, then they may well form good patterns from the outset.
Got
Thank you, Chair. And my question really focuses on the issues of timing. And I certainly acknowledge your adaptive management approach and think that's entirely appropriate. But I guess my question is how adaptive can it be in reality? Because what we know is funding, the availability of funding, frankly, is holding back and consistently holding back infrastructure development right across the nation, not only just roads. And the reality is that even if you have an adaptive management approach, unless there is funding for the next stage of the project, it will be delayed. And we know that the National Land Transport Fund is inadequate to fund this level of investment, let alone even the maintenance it seems to be struggling to manage at the moment. So I guess my question is actually how responsive to growth will you be? And shouldn't we be better to be in a position where we have the infrastructure to enable growth rather than react to it?
Look, I think, you know, I take your point, Stephen. I think in reality, what this does is put in place lead indicators. So whilst it won't in itself secure the funding, what it will mean is we're not waiting until it's broken to say, oh, actually, we need some funding now. We are going to be saying as early as possible, which we're seeing the trends now. Now's the time we need to start those conversations for funding. So we're proactively having them at a really early stage where we've still got time to do that response, not waiting. But any investment does absolutely require the funding to be made available at that time.
Many would say it's broken already in terms of the level of congestion that exists on key pinch points of State Highway 29. And certainly from Tauranga City's point of view, we've witnessed over the last 7 years that the business case has been in process since 2016. house prices in Tauranga have risen from 500,000 in the beginning of 2016 to $1 million roughly in recent years, although they have dropped back, I would concede, a little bit in the last wee while. Now, there's a lot of things that drive house prices, including the availability of credit finance and, you know, a whole bunch of supply and demand factors. But the availability of infrastructure-ready land is a key constraint. And it certainly has been a major contributor to escalated house prices. So that leads me to my second question: to what extent are house prices valued in the business case? In the discussion document, it focuses very strongly on the need to provide this infrastructure to enable growth. But I note that in the financial and economic analysis, the impact of rising house prices is not considered. How can we address that issue? What needs to change in order for that to be addressed?
So the business case is supported by a wider economic benefits assessment, but that doesn't explicitly take account of house price affordability. It does address to some extent the need for growth, but not affordability. And that's not currently a priority set through our government policy statement on land transport. So it's not taken into account in our investment priority mapping. So at this point, that doesn't feature in our framework, but is something that we've taken into account in the broader context of the strategic case for the project.
Standing my question, I should note that actually the benefit cost ratio included in the business case is 1.5, including the wider economic benefits, which for given a project of this size and significant in total expenditure is actually a very high number. Yes. And certainly compares very favourably against most of the roads of national significance that the previous government had put through. So notwithstanding the fact it doesn't take account of the impact on home buyers in this city and this sub-region, even the transport benefits and the wider economic benefits are quite significant in their own right and should be noted. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Following on from that question, we had a briefing this morning for Kangaora on the specified development project, which is all about government's initiative to provide affordable housing, and with a vision of up to 40,000 in that corridor, Western Corridor. And so on the one hand, we've got a government initiative there to address an absolutely critical need. And then we have the other agency, if you like, of government saying, well, it's not our funding, and we don't even take that into consideration as part of our formula in considering the value is. So to me, there's just a glaring example there of two arms of government not in sync and not focused on the critical aspect of this project to this region, particularly with the expansion of the Golden Triangle, the industries that are moving south for the region to understand the freight routes, all of that, the growth of the region. And I would have thought it was critical to put that as part of the criteria for the consideration and the priority setting, because it's overall overarching government policy, but just the two wings of government don't seem to be in sync. I just invite your comment on that.
Yeah, I guess I can, notwithstanding that the GPS does not direct us to include housing. If we did, we would have to include it in all our business cases. So the relativity, it would be a relativity issue anyway. But let me reassure you that we are very connected with our colleagues at Ministry of Housing and Urban Development and Kangaora, and Brad and John from HUD are both up there on the screen with their cameras off at the moment. But we collectively sit on both the Smart Growth and Future Proof forums at the table with many of you. And at an operational level, we work very closely together on how our work enables their work and vice versa. So please be reassured, we are very connected. We actively consider each other's priorities as we are developing our business cases, notwithstanding that in an explicit way, the cost of housing, for example, is not accounted for. But in a wider sense, absolutely, we work very closely together. And that's, I guess, evidenced by the fact that the ministers that attend those forums are the Minister of Housing and the Minister of Transport and the Minister of Local Government, and they are very tight. So, yeah.
So to speak again, but I just really want to underline why this is such a critical issue for the sub-region. And it's because the ratio of house prices to income in this sub-region is the highest in the country. The highest in the country. And the reason for that is that we haven't provided the infrastructure in a timely way that opens up the land, that gives us a competitive land market that drives down house prices. And so this is why it is so critical that we get, as a country, all of our issues in alignment, all of our thinking in alignment, all of our strategy in alignment. That's why I raise it. I think it's critical. It's a message. It's a really important message that when the leaders meet with ministers in Wellington, need to convey, because it is holding our region back. And frankly, waiting till 2050 when we know house prices are already through the roof, and waiting to 2050 before we can unlock this land is just not tenable. I'm sure in our resolutions we will be making a point on that, but I think it's critical, and I really wanted to make that point. It's not a criticism of the team of NZTA. I see you all shaking your heads in agreement. I think we're all in alignment, but our processes are not in alignment.
Could I just acknowledge that at the Regional Transport Committee meeting recently, the work you did and the resolution that was passed in exactly that effect to give acknowledge to the fact that housing is one of the issues that the Regional Transport Committee want to take account of. So, yeah, you're making the right steps.
I was pleased to hear you say that public transport is important from day one, which infers that the infrastructure occurs prior to the building of any homes, which puts the urgency of the timing. Reinforces that as a reasoning for it. Now, I presume it also reinforces the reasoning or the argument for a continuation of any public transport subsidy for public transport, which will be less than, probably won't meet the revenue ratios that might be expected when the subdivisions are still being developed. So is that part of the process? Is that the increased subsidies?
That's a political call that we have not built any assumption into the business case for that. But obviously that is a political call that I will leave in your capable hands.
Any other questions? Oh, Phil, sorry.
Thanks, Chair. I'm just interested, Jess, around the modelling and then the subsequent monitoring that you've outlined, particularly in respect of stage 4. And if I can preface my question, though, in terms of my own view that there tends to be an innate conservatism in modelling that's undertaken. And if I can just highlight an example in terms of the Waikato Expressway. So the final stage of that was opened last year. And it is now reached, and I experience myself on a reasonably regular basis, which I comment to David on, that the traffic volumes have now reached, I think it's less than a year since it's opened, the 2035 modelling estimates or thereabouts. So that's 12 years at least earlier than that modelling. So the reason I raised that is that in respect of stage 4, you then talked about we'll actively monitor that and then potentially, I presume, the ability to bring that forward, and was just having a bit more understanding of what all that active monitoring means, and is it just more of the same in terms of modelling, or are there other things at play in respect of that?
I think it's fair to say one should always take modelling results with a grain of salt. So what we're talking about is not more modelling, but actually monitoring what's happening on the ground. So one of the great things in today's world is we're all being watched by Big Brother via Bluetooth, and the utility for us is that whilst it's not personal data, we can actively tag how many vehicles are going past at any point. So together with TCC and Western Bay, there are a number of sensors all around the city, and we are looking to expand that into this area so we can actually see from day one how many people are using this road. And that's how, for example, on the Waikato Expressway example, we know the answer, and we know that we've exceeded the modelling because we've got those sensors there as well. So what we're looking at is actually having that live data. We can see in real time how many people are going. Obviously, we'll also have more information about the growth. How fast are the houses being built, and how are those growth areas being unlocked? Because that allows more nuanced kind of shorter term modelling where you can go, well, actually, this is happening faster than what we said back in 2023 when we didn't know what we were talking about, and let's bring it forward. So I think what we'll be able to do, for example, if we're 12 months in and we've built stage 3, and we go, well, actually, we're already at the 35 numbers. Quick, let's get going. And I think that'll make a big difference. You'll have real live data to work with.
Chair. So hypothetically, if it occurred and you felt it needed to be brought forward, presumably it would still have to go through all of those funding processes that are in place. So that's obviously not an overnight event.
It depends how the funding was structured, but yeah, you would have to secure the construction funding at that time. But what you would have at that point is you'd have your RMA approvals in place because we'll have already route protected it, and that triggers us to start buying property. So we'll already own, a portion of the property. So yes, funding needs to be resolved, but we will have a kickstart into that process. It won't be another kind of few years in order to just get to the entry gate to start building.
I know it sounds all very logical and good in theory. The reality is you won't be able to build any of those houses until the roading's there, and you won't build the roading until the houses are there. So you just said, if more houses are built, but actually you won't be allowed to build those houses, as we found in Tauranga, because the roading isn't there. So it's not going to work in practice. And the second thing, I look at your stage 4, and you're proposing sort of 8 to 10 years construction time. So we're not going to start building the road until the need is proven, and then it's going to take 10 years to construct, or 8 years to construct, by which time it will be underspec for what the growth probably is by then. So that's my problem with and I understand what you've done in the system, and it's great that you've got the monitoring in place, but I just can't see that is actually going to work. I understand the theory. I just think in practice the reality is that we need it faster, we need it committed. And I know Jane's got another question.
Thank you very
Don
much.
And then Ken.
For coming to say, I really welcome the fact that you're going to do a lot of monitoring and have these triggers, which will be signals on when you need to bring things forward. My point is it's not just about numbers of vehicles on the network, it's on congestion and loss of productivity. So what are your plans to do that measurement for congestion? We've already got significant congestion on our network, where people are reporting, an hour and a half to make a journey that they used to be able to make in 20 minutes. So we're already suffering from the lack of this infrastructure. And if we have to wait another 20 years, I shudder to think what the loss of productivity will be across the whole economy. So can you give me some assurance that you're going to be measuring the congestion levels and trigger us bringing this forward?
Yeah, there's probably a few things to kind of expand on in response. The first thing to say, when we talk about the long-term stage, what we know is that the current sources of the key congestion we're seeing at the moment are Barks Corner and a toll road roundabout outside the crossings. So what stage 3 is, it's called the 29A piece, is designed, it will address the congestion we're seeing today and get us back to a level of service that allows us to function with a functioning economy and people moving freely around. So we're not going to just build that and leave it congested. That will fix it for a period of time. And then what we want to do is use those lead indicators to see how it's trending and when do we need to intervene with the next stage to maintain that. And the points taken, we want to do that before it gets back to where we are, not afterwards. The monitors do quite a few things. So it doesn't just count the number of vehicles, it also allows us to see how long it's taking people. So, you'll know from Google Maps that you can put it in and it'll tell you today it's going to take you an hour, tomorrow it's going to take you an hour and a half. And this allows us to actually get a sense of how long it's taking people to move. And we can work with the trucking industry around things like their e-roads data to understand, particularly for freight, how are their movements being affected? Because, what we can accept and the reliability for them is really important as well. We can also work with regional council to understand how are the buses travelling, are they getting the level of service they need to provide that reliability that's so crucial to ensuring people keep using the bus. So it's more nuanced than just numbers going past the gate. We get to look at movements in a whole bunch of ways and understand the real life scenario that people are living with as to what is, levels of service in exact numbers. I think there is data in behind that, but I think it's around providing really crucial reliability for freight, making sure those buses can move reliably, and then making sure we're ahead of that congestion, so we're not having people wait for, sitting still at those key intersections.
It wasn't so much a question, just agreeing entirely with you, Chair Tolley, because the Western Bay has experience of lack of houses. You've got your 8,000 houses potentially at Wairaki to Tumu, your 2,000 at Tauranga. Western Bay has a zone now on the western side of the Wairau River, which now has no more capacity at all. So it has reached capacity. We've seen cases in Omokoroa, people now are resisting and pulling out of there and even moving to Tauranga to live because they're just so fed up with it. So I agree entirely with you. So, I'd welcome 2,000 capacity certainly out our way.
Yes, I take your point that all models are wrong and some are more wrong than others, but it's the failure to look at sort of future growth with the models that worries me. And you talk about monitoring and sort of lead and initiatives, but the need's overwhelming. And we know that the benefit cost ratio formula has got its flaws. And I think we should learn from history because back in 1959, the National Roads Board, they could not get the Auckland Harbour Bridge to reach parity to build the Auckland Harbour Bridge in 1959. Did not reach one in cost benefit. And then within 10 years, they had to do that was a 4-lane bridge. They had to put 4 extra lanes, 2 each side with the clip-ons. So, and of course, North Shore just boomed with that bridge. And we've got the same situation here. There's just so much pressure for growth and we're behind it. To get ahead, you have to realise the limitation of that benefit cost ratio formula. And if you just use it as a blind constraint, you just won't allow for that growth potential that is just the pressures driving in this region.
My concern is this looks fine. The problem is that we are very close to opening up the jibboard factory at Kauriko now, and we're going to have, I can't just the figures, it's something like a 50-ton truck every 3 minutes when it's unloading and loading. And so have you taken that capacity into account? And the fact that past the toll road hasn't been 4-lane ready for that now means we're going to have congestion. We're going to have congestion because you haven't got Toka Street ready for the number of trucks that are going to, and this is just one industry, and we've known it's coming and we've done nothing about it. What's your answer to that? And when the next industry starts out at Tauranga, how are we going to deal with that?
I think, Mike, this is why it's so important that we and Ministry of Housing and Urban Development and Kaingora sit with yourselves in smart growth and future proof. We collectively have to take responsibility for the planning decisions we make. It's not just eroding planning, it's also urban planning. It's also how the development that you allow drives a demand in transport, which we then react to. That's the wrong way around. So this is about us being more accountable to our community of doing that forward planning that we are doing, I think, quite well now in future proof and smart growth forums. And I use both of those because I think both are very, very strong, very, very powerful forums that have got central government and local government sitting together. I know it's not a specific answer, but it is the right answer, I think, for us to go forward so that we are not reacting 5 years later to land use decisions that you make, that we go, oh, well, gosh, they did that and now there's lots of trucks and we haven't got ahead of the infrastructure. Instead, we're having those conversations that say, well, we want to develop here and we want to develop here. Does that make sense? What's the lead in for the infrastructure that you need? And all I can say is I think we are getting better at that. We are currently now wearing some of the consequence of not being good at that in the past.
But you say that, but we've known this is coming at us, this particular one, and it's massive, and it's going to congest. And I know it's on your plan for the Topher Street, but what about Elizabeth Street? And then coming down, once you get down to Barks Corner, you have the toll road down there. This is going to be a major, and you have known it's coming, and there is nothing that I can see that is really planned for it. And I'm not blaming you because it's a funding issue. So, but it has to be taken into account. We're going to actually, that one factory could totally gridlock Takatima.
Kia ora. It's nice to see. Oh, and nice to see you again. I'm trying not to be too critical, but coming from Waihi Beach, Katikati Ward, I'd have to disagree with what you've just said, because Omokoroa has been like a blight in our travel path for a very, very long time. And we had promises, and it was there. It was going to happen, and then it didn't happen, and then it did happen, and then it didn't happen. So I'm not blaming you, but it seems like the political environment or whoever's in it today is holding us by the strings, or had held us. I don't know what the situation is now, but how something can be on and we can all working towards it, putting people in there, the pressure that we're putting them under, and then it can just be taken away, and then it can come back, and then it can be taken away again. It's like, hello. You wouldn't do that to children. Why are you doing it to us?
Yeah, look, I'm obviously not a politician, but look, all I can say is acknowledge that is in fact the case, and that those political decisions are made, and they're made in the context of some pretty significant changing priorities. For example, Cyclone Hale, Cyclone Gabrielle, Cyclone whatever else that we've had in the last 6 months have completely changed the landscape of funding that we are working in. And there is no question that there are going to be winners and losers as a consequence of that, because there is only so much money to go around. And New Zealand is actually a very small country when you start looking at how do we manage the infrastructure cost of those events. That is our reality. And I've said this to Stephen and Co before, one of the best things we can do is be very, very clear about what our priorities are and have really strong business cases in place to justify those priorities as in when that opportunity arises to secure funding and to hold on to it. If we don't do that, if we're not at the front of that queue when funding decisions are made, we will miss out. So this is a huge step in having this business case, hopefully having it endorsed, hopefully being able to move forward in the next stages to being in a really good place when that funding is available and has certainty.
This is a message to take back, and that the biggest port in New Zealand, I don't know whether it's the worst, but let's say it's the worst or near to the worst, traffic problems. It's all increasing everything that we buy and sell in New Zealand. You know, it's not helping the economy. Somewhere along the line, someone's got to wake up and go, hey, we need to really do something here. We need to build it tomorrow.
Hey, look, in fairness to these guys, they're presenting a business case. That's great. I have to say it's great sitting around the table listening to all of that because there's no doubt that central government policies have done this sub-region in the eye. And we are absent. We have not had the investment in infrastructure that we not only deserve, but that we actually need. So in fairness to these guys, they are the arm that is presenting the business case. The message is good, and that's the message that we'll discuss in the smart growth, which is the partnership that we've been working in. I was tempted to respond to you, David, along the lines that Anne did, because actually this region has been planning well for a long time, but central government has let them down of many colours. And so Brad and John know that that's a discussion that we've been having for a long time. So the last one, and then I think we need to get on with our meetings. Margaret, we have the last word, Margaret. There we are.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The spirit of cooperation that existed here in about 2008 was something to be commended. Everybody, smart growth, all agreed they'd have 12,000 people living at Mokoroa, and we would work towards having the transport plan to get there. And then when Michael Woods became the minister, he took Te Puna to Mokoroa plus the interchange off the 10-year plan. There's absolutely nothing you could do about that. That's a political decision. Flick the money off from Belk Road upgrade, which has really annoyed everybody. And so your responsibility, I'm not on smart growth, but I'm adamant that if you work together and you're all of one mind, Te Puna to Mokoroa and the interchange has got to come back on the plan, and it's a sense of urgency because, as Anne has said, people are leaving there because they can't get on the road to even get further down the highway. And so, Madam Chair, you carry a great responsibility, and I just feel sorry for the transport agency. I can knock them around the ears, but at the same time, they do have a problem. And I'm adamant that that State Highway 29 up from the Kaimais is one that's desperately in need of attention. So best wishes, because you've got a great deal of work to do and not much time to do it in.
Very much. Thank you to the three of you for coming and presenting that business case. And I think thank you for the work that you've done in preparing that. We understand you're working to a system. We don't agree with your system. We've told you that, but you have to make it fit. And we do appreciate that you've done everything you can to actually make it fit the system as best you can to get it even to this stage. So much appreciated. Thank you very much. Pause.
We were wondering.
So if you didn't hear that, we're all sitting around the table. We've now got 3 separate council meetings. We'll each have our own set of officials come up to the end of the table. But I think we can all stay here and we just...
All collective.
Okay, so do we start the Tauranga City meeting? Okay, so I'm officially opening the Tauranga City Council meeting. We have no apologies because we're all here. There's no one in the public forum for us. We have no late items, and this will count for other than apology. Or do we want to take all the apologies now, or do you want to do that individually in your meeting? Okay, all right, keep it easy for the staff. No confidential business, no change to the order of business, no confirmation of minutes, any declarations of conflicts of interest. No deputations, no recommendations. That brings us to the business on hand, which is the only item on the agenda. Mr. Chief Executive.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to hand over straight to General Manager of Strategy and Growth, Christine Jones.
Good afternoon. So this is the TC team for State Highway 29 that we've been working on. So given the business case has already been overview of the strategic importance of the Western Corridor and State Highway 29 business case and future-proofing investment in that context. And then we just want to talk through the recommended resolutions that we're presenting to you and the rationale behind that, and then open up if there's any questions that you have of TCC staff, if you're comfortable with that way forward.
I'll just pick up with the strategic importance. Andrew Mead, the Manager of City Planning and Growth at Tauranga City Council, for those that don't know me. Western Corridor is one of our key growth corridors through smart growth and UFTI as agreed across the partnership and with central government. It's been an area of significant growth over the last probably 2 decades and with significant planned growth carrying on into the future. Some of those growth areas are being planned now, and there's potential for a significant amount of future growth long term. Obviously, none of that can happen without the long-term transport solution. My comments just quickly will focus, I guess, on the more near-term land use, particularly the Tauranga West and the Tauranga Business Estate extensions, which are going through sort of plan change processes. As we speak, we're about to be both notified. And I guess notwithstanding the points that have already been made about the shortcomings of a long-term staged investment solution here, if we do look at stage 3 and the investment around the Barks Corner area, which will unlock a large amount of growth, particularly all of Tauranga West and all of the Tauranga Business Estate extension, and in a time frame based on the slides, which is aligned with the land use development. But the issue we face is that we are working through a range of planning processes at the moment. So the plan change, we're working through a range of funding agreements, and the developers at the same time are working through their commercial kind of feasibility and trying to get their house in order to develop. Until there's real certainty that there is commitment and funding for the delivery of that infrastructure, which is a range of steps ahead of where we are today, those processes still face significant risks. So I think the point that I'm trying to make here is that we need to go beyond where we've got to today. And of course, that's where everyone's heading. But to get to the point where funding is committed for delivery on those timeframes to have that investment in place, or else we will find continued challenges in moving forward other processes associated with our near-term growth areas in the Western Corridor, let alone the future growth that we would all like to be able to unlock.
Afternoon all, my name's Alistair Talbot. I'm the team leader of structure planning and strategic transport with the City Council. So just in terms of the context that Andy's provided there, there are recommendations in front of Council to consider. Those recommendations that the business case is endorsed by the City Council for submission to the board, that being the Wakatē board, for their approval. But in that context of needing to secure delivery sooner to then enable those outcomes that are planned for the Western Corridor, that delivery occurs sooner and within 10 years. We've also focused our recommendations on the need to future-proof the solution, and some of the analysis has shown there are pinch points remaining in the design. Those pinch points are focused at Barks Corner, and in the, well, what's known as the Toll Road roundabout. So we've suggested that Waka should focus their next stage of work on continuing to look at solutions or improved solutions for those two particular points of the solution with wider improvement. We've also suggested that a 4-lane bridge rather than a 2-lane bridge be constructed across the Omanawah stream that would connect and transition into 4-lane sections of road either side of what's currently proposed as a 2-lane bridge. We think that's quite important given the strategic function of that part of the network and would remove an immediate pinch point in the design. Finally, there's just a note on the costs and the cost share arrangements to TCC. And at the time of writing the report, we didn't have dollar values. I can confirm those now. The Redwood Lane 0.2 million at a P95 estimate level, that's 32.3. That would be in stage 4 of the delivery of the project. And the more immediate cost share would be between 4.1 and 5.1 million associated with walking and cycling connections on Marshall Ave to connect to the Barks Corner improvement. Thank you.
Okay, so look, I have to say it's really good to be sitting at the table with our Western sub-region partners because this process began back in 2016 and it was signed off by the 3 councils to develop the business case. And of course it was signed off in the RLTP to fund the business case again by the members sitting around the table. So it's appropriate that we have a look at this next stage of that business case together. And there is no doubt that in 2018, the 2018 GPS dramatically changed the outlook for this region. It's probably not fair to blame Michael Wood, whoever blamed Michael Wood, because I think it was someone before that. But we lost 29, we lost Hewlett's, and we lost State Highway 2 out of that GPS, which has done this region a huge disservice, and we're now trying to make up rapidly for that. Part of that is the enabling works in Tauranga West, which gives us at least some 2,000 odd houses out of a possible 4 in that part, and an extension to the business estate there, which provides work. That has a cost of about 260 million, so it's not cheap. And we're still negotiating it because a real chunk of that comes from the developers themselves, both in what they develop, but also in their development contributions, which help pay for that. That's about 80 million of that. We're lucky to get 80 million from the government through HIF to help with that. And Waka Kotahi's share of that is just under 87 million. So they are large. It's a large investment as a make-up, if you like, to get something moving in this area. So I think for me the important issues are that again, as a sub-region, we endorse this business case going through to the next stage. But as we've heard, this doesn't guarantee that this road gets any sort of priority whatsoever. It's got to go down, it's got to pass, be endorsed by the board, so they have to accept it. And then it goes into the regional land transport program, and we're probably, again, only looking at stage 1 of that, getting through in the next 3 years. So it is important that we endorse it, I think, and show as a sub-region that this is important. It is important that it doesn't then create more pinch points, and so that the recommendations from the staff take that into account, because otherwise we're just pushing the problem literally down the road. It is important that we future-proof so that we're not building a 2-lane bridge that eventually a 4-lane highway will come up to and leave with a 2-lane bridge in the middle. That just seems nuts. So we do need to make sure that it's future-proofed. And to the timing, Andrew, I think it was about this time last year, we had the privilege of meeting with the Minister of Finance and Infrastructure, and we laid out the plan then for State Highway 29, and we referenced the Winstones factory that was starting to be built. I think it's 87 truckloads every 24 hours over 6 days, over 3 days every 6 weeks. And that isn't just gibboard for Tauranga. The gypsum has to come from the port into the factory and then out of the factory over the Kaimais and around to the rest of New Zealand to help with the cost of building in the rest of New Zealand. So we've been trying to make preparation, and in fact we wrote to the ministers that we're in partnership with, then saying this road needed to be constructed in the next 10 years. And the reality is that only central government can make any of the changes we're talking about today. The presentation we had from, I think the regional team have done a great job for us within the system. But the only people that can change what we're asking for and give the funding and the certainty are central government. So in the normal course of events, we'd have a recommendation that we took it to Smart Growth and asked the Smart Growth leaders to go down and put it in front of the ministers. But we don't need to do that recommendation today because we're all sitting around the table and we're going to have a Smart Growth meeting. So, you know, let's get on with it.
Thanks, Chair. And I think the issues have been canvassed, and on that basis, I'm happy to move the recommendations. But I just want to make the comment that the recommendations we have in front of us relate to the business case for State Highway 29. In the context of the wider discussion that we've just had, that the priorities for this region are State Highway Stage 2, State Highway 29, Hewlett's Hull Totara, and I'd just quietly add in Turret Road, 15th Ave. But certainly from a state highway perspective, State Highway 2, State Highway 29, Hewlett's Hull Totara, and I know we're going to be having those discussions in Smart Growth shortly, but this council, Tauranga City Council, fully endorses those as the sub-regional priority projects. David, I hope you heard that loud and clear. We are passing this recommendation, which I'm happy to move, Chair, on the basis of the current State Highway 29 business case, noting in particular the timing issues and the issues around pinch points and providing sufficient capacity so that when we do find the funds, we've got a bridge over Manawa that actually has the capacity to carry the traffic that's going to and from it. So with that, I'll move the motion.
Yeah, I'm happy to support the resolutions, the Tauranga City Council resolutions. I do want to make the point, and I didn't really get a chance to check in with the Waka Kotahi team, just around the connections and the relationships they've built over the last 7 years, particularly with mana whenua, working through that corridor and picking up the points that were raised about the enhancements around the Kopurerero and Regional Council, along with ourselves, are working through those rehabilitation projects. But also thinking about the Wairoa River corridor itself as well, and understand mana whenua working quite closely with ourselves, but also with our sub-regional partners around the review of the Wairoa River strategy, which I think plays quite an important role for that environment and that corridor, and particularly the connection through to State Highway 29, but also the land use changes over time and the managing those effects and impacts into those environments. I am heartened just reading through the business case itself, the work that's gone in by mana whenua in particular. I did have a role back in 2016 when this project first started, along with TNL. So it's great to see the ongoing support and ongoing work with the partners and mana whenua to work through those challenges. So along with Stephen and Bill, yeah, happy to support the resolution.
Okay, so no further discussion. I'll put the motion. That's the recommendations outlined in the agenda. Receiving it, endorsing it, and reconfirming those timing, pinch point, and future-proofing issues, and then the cost shares. So the requirement on TCC. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. And with that, I close the TCC meeting. Oh, good. Oh, good. I noticed Doug voted too, so well, it's just inherent in it, isn't it? Move the motion.
Kia ora koutou, I'll declare the Regional Council meeting open, and in doing so, the procedural matters have been taken care of by Commissioner Tolley. So we've got apologies from Councillor Winters and Councillor Eatey. And I'll introduce the Chief Executive and Mike Seaborn.
Kia ora koutou, councillors. Thank you for the opportunity to present this to you today. The key highlight for the communities that the Regional Council serve is that public transport is prioritised in this business case, phased to start as soon as possible, and will be completed within 8 years. Staff recommend the Regional Council support the Tauranga Networks Connections business case being submitted to Waka Kotahi for their approval. Staff also support the Tauranga City Council's position that there is a strong preference and need for the project to be delivered in a single stage within a decade. We would like to take this opportunity to thank Waka Kotahi staff for how they have worked with Regional Council staff and both prioritised and integrated public transport service requirements to both improve the reliability of these services, but ultimately increase the number of people who will be using public transport in this sub-region. Mike would like to cover a few specific details for you.
Kia ora koutou everyone, Mike Seaborn, the Director of Public Transport for the Regional Council. Just a couple of main dimensions of our consideration. We're just noting that the proposal has an improved travel time reliability for freight and for traffic in the area. And in a regional consideration, that makes it a regionally significant in both the project and a nationally significant freight route. In terms of the proposal itself, it is a significant opportunity around mode shift, particularly with the way the project is designed and connected with the Kainga Order offering, as well as the growth opportunities in the area. And just lastly, but quite dear to my heart at least, it's an increased level of service for our PT customers. So we do believe that in terms of the planning that's going on around the transport system, and that's a really important point for us to sort of connect to, is that this exists within a transport system. This will help us to encourage more customers and patronage on our bus routes, get our role in the transport system sort of beefed up, and the ability to sort of increase the amount of patronage that we can see in that particular corridor, and particularly with stage 3. So we do note that that's the timing of that is really important to this council. And that's it.
So through you, Chair, the recommendations are on page 2 of the covering note, and that the Regional Council receives the report, endorses in principle the Tauranga State Highway 29 Network Connections business case, and recommends to Council Smart Growth members support the recommendations in the attached Smart Growth paper.
Been moved and seconded. It's now open for a discussion. Is there any discussion? Being no Councillor Nees.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to note that the business case assumes delivery of the public transport reference case hybrid network, which is a figure in our report. And it also the report also recognises that we have to modify the Western Bay of Plenty public transport services and infrastructure business case to accommodate it. I just want to note how critical approval of this will be by Waka Kotahi, because there will be quite a massive increase in expenditure required by the Regional Council in our long-term plan. So since we are starting on our long-term plan journey at the moment, and recognising that stage 3 will be completed in 2031, and our long-term plan will extend from 2024 to 2034, it's a very significant decision for us also, but I'm very happy to support the motion, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Nees. Councillor Crosby.
Just to be brief, obviously I support this and congratulations to those that put the business case together over a long period of time. I think the previous conversations, particularly in the forum part, have indicated that there is a significant system failure in this country when it comes to transport. And it's incumbent upon all of us who have all our connections across New Zealand with multiple people in various agencies and in political parties to impress upon them, one, the need for this project, but also the need to reform the way in which we deliver transport in this country. Many of us have been around from various prime ministers of various parties and seen a flip-flop in GPS policy, and there's another one coming. And that, in my view, inhibits nation building. It inhibits people to have homes and businesses to develop. So in supporting this, I think we can't just support this and then let Waka Kotahi or the Regional Land Transport Committee do all their work. I think we all collectively need to support this.
Thank you, Councillor Crosby, Councillor McDonald and Councillor Thurston.
Kia ora, Mr. Chair. Just a point of clarification. I actually sit here wearing 2 hats today, and I need to clarify those hats that I'm wearing. I am the Smart Growth Chair for the Combined Tangata Whenua Forum. However, the vote that I'm taking today, which I'm going to support the Regional Council, is as a Bapedi Regional Councillor. I am not expressing my support as the chair of the Smart Growth Combined Tangata Whenua Forum, because that meeting has not been held. This meeting has not been held with that group yet. So that support is reserved by Tangata Whenua of that Smart Growth Forum until that meeting is held. Thank you.
Councillor Thurston.
Thank you, Chairman. As someone who doesn't even live in the area and I actually live over the back fence, I'm really delighted to support this. And in my many terms on regional council, I have put getting Tauranga and the Western Bay moving right at the forefront of all my decision making. So, and I think I speak for other colleagues in Rotorua too. But as chair of the Regional Transport Committee, and I think Commissioner Selwood and others will support us here, I think the committee has always had total focus on getting Tauranga and the Western Bay moving. We've supported you, I think, on every opportunity that we can, and you can count on my support. And as long as I'm in the role, pray God, we will keep Tauranga moving and enable all the Rotorua people to come here and live and be part of the 5,000 who move here willingly every year. So thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Councillor Thurston. So, Councillor White.
Kia ora, Mr. Chair. I support my colleague from Rotorua. Looking from Rotorua into Tauranga, I can see the problems you've been having here, and it's a mind-boggling thing that we don't yet have it in Rotorua, and I hope we don't ever have it there. But totally support the conversation and the resolutions that have been passed. So kia ora.
Councillor White. So just before I put the resolution, could I acknowledge our colleagues and friends from Waka Kotahi? I think my contribution to this, and a lot has been said, and I think a lot of it has been upon on the frustration that the community collectively has around this process. Look, I think your business case is sound, but I'd have to say that I don't think it's aspirational enough in terms of delivery and in terms of the funding mechanisms you've got in front of you. The old adage goes, if you keep doing the same things as you always do, you're going to get the same results. And you've heard me say this before. And I think if I can implore upon you that you take back to your direct report, the Chief Executive of Waka Kotahi and the Board of Waka Kotahi, the sentiments expressed here today about the frustration and about a willingness to look at new ways of doing things. Because if you keep doing what we're doing, you know, you'll be back here in 5 years, whether or not you want to bring stage 4 forward, but we need a revisit to it. I appreciate you as officials. You are saddled with processes, procedures, and policies, and they probably need revisiting. And as a collective group here, we can deal or we can make submission to the politicians, but essentially at the executive level, we'd appreciate your support in trying to revisit the way that we deliver services. So I wish you well, and a lot of what we've been talking about here today, especially in terms of the arterial substance of State Highway 29, is not just about the Western Bay. This is about New Zealand Inc. And you can see the commercial movements from South Auckland into the Waikato, Tainui Group Holdings and the big investment they're making there. That's all going to compound issues that we already know about. So I'd urge you to take our commentary very seriously, and as has been said, we will make submissions to the politicians at the appropriate time. So on those matters, the recommendation has been moved and seconded. All those in favour from the Regional Council, say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Chair Tolley.
Okay, so we'll let our staff set up if that's okay. Okay, I think we're good to go. So I declare the council meeting CL 23/9 open at 3:16 and welcome everyone here. Please note that the meeting's being live streamed and the consequences of that. I have 3 apologies from Councillor Coxhead, Councillor Joyce and Councillor Sol. I look for a mover and seconder for those, please. Councillor Murray Bench, Councillor Crawford. I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. There are no late items. Does anyone have a declaration of interest? No. There are no public excluded items and I'm not aware of anyone for public forum. So move to page 7 and the item of the day. Tauranga State Highway 29 network connections. And I'd like to introduce our Deputy CEO and GM for Infrastructure, Gary Ellis, to briefly talk about that.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the report from the Western Bay supports the business case, and I was going to take that as read. What I would like to talk about is the difference we've got in clause 2.2 in terms of the resolution for Western Bay, and I'll read that resolution. That council endorses the Tauranga Network Connections business case being submitted to Waikato for its approval, noting that the Takituma North Link Stage 2 is of equal priority for the sub-region, and noting the urgency of the Mokara State Highway 2 interchange in particular. And while this report is around the business case, I'd just like to explain why we put that addition into the resolution. Mokara was designated a growth area under smart growth in the early 2000s, and since that time this council has been working to achieve the growth and the housing growth in Mokara. And Takituma North stages 1 and 2 supported that growth. The funding commitment for Takituma North was previously committed by NZTA at the time, and the project was to be finished by 2015. So at the moment, obviously we've got stage 1 underway, which is fantastic, but the council, the community of Mokara and our community and the users of State Highway 2 still need stage 2. Stage 2 supports the housing growth in Mokara. It's an existing housing growth area that's growing now. It's not a future housing growth area. And it also supports improved commuting time and opportunities for modal shift and for passenger transport once it's in place, when you've got the 4-lane road in place. You would be aware of current media around delay times on Highway 2, and where you have commute times of 2 hours from Mokara to Tauranga when there are small roadworks, potentially just in the city, then our residents and the use of Highway 2 are finding that unacceptable. And that's the background. It's about improving that commute time, improving modal choice and enabling housing growth is why it's recommended to our council those additional clauses in that resolution.
Thank you, Gary. I'll ask if there's any questions, noting that we had quite a few questions on the overall topic earlier of Waka Kotahi. So, are there any questions for Gary? There being none, I shall call for a mover and seconder for the two recommendations and the subparts of those. So, is there a mover? Councillor Henry, and I will second that. Okay. Speakers for and against the motion, please. Councillor Granger.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to move an amendment, if I may, to point 3, little 3. It says, support Tauranga City Council's position that there is a strong preference and need for the project to be delivered. I would like to insert the words, the State Highway 29 project to be delivered. The reasons for that is that there are 4 projects that have been identified in this recommendation. And as Mr. Ellis has just said, that point 2 links 2 of those projects, Takatimu North Link and State Highway 29. And it's critical that the 4 projects are considered separately in funding rounds, and that the Commission, and as Commissioner Selwood has already said, that our regional priority is State Highway 2, TNL2. And I don't want some clever politician reading these minutes later on to come up with the excuse that we want it all done as one project and therefore we can't afford it. I would like the priorities to remain, and that's why I would like the extra word State Highway 29 project as the project that we are asking to be considered as a single stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Granger. Rather than have it as an amendment, I suggest that if Councillor Henry is supportive of that, I would be as well. Would you be keen to include that?
We've spent a lot of time talking about State Highway 29 today, and I'd be happy to include that.
Okay, thank you. So that would be support Tauranga City Council's position that there's a strong preference and need for the State Highway 29 project to be delivered in a single stage, etc., etc. Okay. Any other speakers for and against that amended motion, please? Councillor Thwaites.
Thanks, Mayor James. I hope when you put the vote that you actually break down the sub-points in bullet point 2, because I will only be voting for bullet point 1 and 2, which endorses the business case. I believe 3, 4 and 5 are superfluous, and they're actually, all they do is to break out tiny parts of the business case. So to me, they're redundant. So I'll vote for 2 and 1. Look, I've been around, I guess once you've been a 5-term councillor, you've been around a while and you've heard a few speeches about significance and growth. And I've got a couple of mayors either side of me who were around at the time the TEL was put forward, and a case for funding to build 18 kilometres of motorway expressway down there to open up all that Wairaki Titumu block of land. And in defence of Waka Kotahi, I honestly question TCC's commitment to really do that. You know, they've spent a fortune putting a water supply in place. They've totally wrecked number 1 road in the process with digging it up and wrecking it, which we're about to rehabilitate. So I'm disappointed that they haven't put more focus on that. And now suddenly with 8,000 houses available to get going, they're suddenly charging off and claiming housing shortages is the big problem. But anyway, that it was just the word deja vu came to mind when I heard those speeches. We certainly have an impending problem of a $40 million wastage of a temporary roundabout at Omokarawa very shortly. Who knows? The events in 120 odd days' time might well dictate which way that goes. But to put a temporary roundabout right in the path now, I really question the value of that when money is so short. I was around long before I was a councillor when the designation for the TNL went through as well. That was the $92 million project, stage 2. $92 million would have built. And if you add the cost of TEL went ahead, by delaying all these projects, they just become so expensive. So I am mindful. So going back to my original point, I will be supporting bullet points 1 and 2, and I hope you take, because I believe 3, 4 and 5 aren't required. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers for or against? Deputy Mayor Scrimger.
I'd like, sorry.
Yeah, I'd like to speak in support of the motions. Issues have been pretty well canvassed today, but the need for this is really about people and industry, and the two go together hand in hand. And we've heard a lot of the impacts of people and the need for housing. Because of the industrial, perhaps not a good choice of words, but because of the needs of industry and various activities, there is a great need for people, and that draws people in. On top of that, we have the desirable location in which we live that brings so many people to this place, and a whole lot more want to come. It's worth reflecting on the fact that over the last 25 years, the population of the sub-region has increased by about 80%. If we go back over the last 70 years to the early 1950s, it's increased something like 12 or 13%. And so population has been increasing much more rapidly here than in other parts of our country. And if we think about what might happen over the next 25 years, I know growth won't be linear, but if you assume another 70 or 80% increase in the population, even this will be insufficient. And to suggest that some of these activities can wait virtually till 2050 seems utterly ridiculous to me. So while I support the motions, I absolutely endorse the need to challenge the timeframes as we move forward.
I need a new microphone, to be honest. Oh, it's in there now anyway. Okay, so I'll carry on. Okay, so before I offer Councillor Henry her right to reply, oh, did you want to speak as well? Okay, well, you can go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've waited a long time and I've lived in this area for over 20 years now, and I've lived on Ngāmoehini Road for over 9. I know State Highway 29 like the back of my hand. I've fought for every intersection upgrade and along the way, be it Ngāmoehini, be it McLaren Falls, and it's been hard work because there's been no clear program as to how to upgrade those intersections on a road that should actually be a state highway. Not a state highway, but a road of national significance. That's how important State Highway 29 has become. And Madam, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Mayor, I think, sir, a Manawa Bridge is at the end of its life and has to be renewed. And so to do it on 4-laning, I think is sensible. But that then brings you to State Highway 2 and the interchange at Omakaroa is wasted money, 45 million to do a roundabout that you know isn't going to work. And I must say that had the Takatumu, our first stage, had gone to tender, the new government could not have stopped it. And I don't apologise for accusing Mr. Woods of actually canning, taking it off the 10-year plan, because that 10-year plan suddenly means nothing. And so a cycle bridge across the Auckland Harbour in the same week, using the funding that should have been going to a Mokoroa and our second stage. I'm really quite angry that we have been misrepresented for so long by politicians in Wellington. And we have to be able to get to the stage where we have longer term thinking as to what and where we're going and how we plan to get there, because people are suffering. The Smart Growth report that was presented just recently highlighted that the average income should be 3 times your average income for an average typed house, medium priced house. At 5 times, it's unaffordable. You said it in the Smart Growth report. And then where are we? Over 8 times. And Western Bay and the Tauranga city is over 11 times. So we're driving people away from this fantastic sub-region, all because we have politicians in Wellington who cannot coordinate and make the decisions that allow the growth to actually be funded appropriately. So when you go to Wellington in this coordinated group, you have to speak to everybody so that they all understand. You can't fiddle with people's lives like they are doing, because you just drive people away from living here when the cost is unaffordable. And as the local government association, Mr. Crosby, not much help in something like this, getting a coordinated approach on this issue. So, Mr. Mayor, I'm happy to support the recommendations, but I am totally disillusioned with the inability of central government to meet the needs of local people. So I support the recommendations, and I hope that the timetable, as Councillor Scrimger has said, can be brought back so that we do things ahead of time and catch up with what needs to be done. And as Councillor Ken Shirley will tell you, that when we did the Eastern Arterial, we had massive infrastructure machinery here. When the decision was made to knock serious roading on the head, that infrastructure machinery went away. And now we have to build it back up again. And you wonder how much cost has actually gone into the fact that we're now in a catch-up mode. So I'm in a totally disillusioned space, Mr. Mayor. I do support the recommendations, and as you, as a member of Smart Growth, take a great responsibility on behalf of the people of Western Bay to make sure that you get some decent decisions coming in from Wellington. We've got to go back on the 10-year plan. We've got to actually have timetables that are met, and we have to make sure that the safety issues that exist on our intersections that don't cost a fortune are actually implemented as soon as possible.
Councillor Murray-Benge. So I'll speak, and if you do you want to rise reply after, and then I'll wrap it up.
I'll try to be brief.
Well, yeah. So I think this investment is vital for the future prosperity of both our district and Tauranga City Council, and of national importance beyond that. I appreciate the support expressed earlier by Councillor Thurston. Many of our residents travel to work within the city, and our horticultural exports need efficient transport to the port. I'm glad that Smart Growth has noted in the next report that TNL2 is of equal priority for the sub-region and the urgency of the Mokoroa State Highway 2 interchange in particular. And I'll be making the case to the ministers when I meet them. So this business case is comprehensive and persuasive, and I'll be supporting the recommendations. Councillor Henry, your way to reply.
Sorry, James, do you mind if I?
Councillor Daly, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I haven't prepared a speech like some of you, but
Excuse me?
I do want to support the additional 3 recommendations as well. And I understand Don's position in not supporting those additional 3 because, you know, the TNL2 is, you know, extremely significant to our council. And it seems that we're here today at the behest of Tauranga City to push this 29 improvement through, which is fair enough. I'm quite happy with that. I think State Highway 29, if this is what it takes to improve the safety of that road, then so be it. And sooner the better, as Margaret has already outlined. And the need for housing in our area has been proven. The development in Papamoa East and Tauranga has been slower than maybe expected, and the intensification is also likely to be problematic. But I do urge, you know, all councils here to support Western Bay and any future endeavours as we've supported this recommendation today. So with that, I support the full recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Delling. Councillor Henry, you're right to reply.
I grew up in Katikati, and one of my great pleasures was to come over to Tauranga to shop. I really enjoyed it. Now, and especially with the roadworks that we had, I loathed it, and I wondered whether I could continue to do that. Little bit of fixing up has been done, and we're back to the normal commute, not 2-hour commute from Katikati. But I have to say that I really am pleased that we have in our recommendation that the recognition of what I had spoke about earlier, the on again, off again, State Highway 2. So that while we're talking about State Highway 21, all the roads into Tauranga are of equal importance in terms of the traffic flows and the productivity moving as it should. We're not holding up, because I believe that's adding to all our inflationary costs as well. I take from what Stuart has said beside me, don't shoot the messenger. So I think it's probably now that I probably have a little bit of apology for the Waka Kotahi people who have also visited us last week, I think it was. But thank you very much for your presentation and your work and your listening to us and hearing what we're saying and understanding the frustrations that we have in this region. And we really hope that we find, and all I'm saying to my people out there, take a good hard look at what you're doing with the next national election, because it is crucial. We really need to have better oversight with our politicians in this area. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Henry. So I've had a request to take the motion in parts, which I'm happy to do. So I shall put the recommendations 1 and 2 with subparts 1 and 2, and then 2 with subparts 3, 4, and 5 separately. Okay, so I'll put the motion that so 1 and 2 parts 1 and 2. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, carried. And then 2 subpart 3, 4, and 5. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. 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 Against, carried. Okay. Thank you very much. So with that, with no more information for receipt and no need to exclude the public for anything further, I'll declare the meeting closed at 3:38. Thank you very much.
Everyone want to stand up and have a bit of a twirl? Before we start smart growth. Come on, let's go. Let's go. So you're welcome, whether you're a smart growth member of smart growth or not. I think, you know, in the spirit of today, you're welcome to sit at the table. Just don't vote when we come to vote. And you don't have any speaking rights. Okay. So if we open up the Smart Growth Leadership Group meeting on today, the 22nd of June, 2023, we've got apologies from Matere Duncan and Matemoana McDonald. That's all I've got at this stage. Everyone else looks to be here. Are there any conflicts of interest to declare? Local government does it a whole lot better than central government, doesn't it? Just saying. Just saying. We do have a speaker in the public forum. I'm going to ask Nigel Tutt from Priority 1 to come up and say a few words. He's asked to come up and say a few words.
Kia ora koutou. So firstly, well done everyone. The region, well the sub-region needs a united voice, so it is very pleasing I think from the rest of us to see you all manage to meet in unison today and support what's a really, really significant business case. So you should be congratulated about that. It hasn't always happened, but I think this is really, really good for the region, so well done. So look, I come here today as Chief Executive of Priority One, the Economic Development Agency for the Western Bay of Plenty, but also as Chair of the Western Bay of Plenty Infrastructure Forum. That's a recently formed forum with a bunch of business agencies and some significant local businesses, so I think the Port, Zespri, Balance, etc. And we were essentially formed because we are in an infrastructure crisis, and we would be better able as businesses to, or the business sector, to be able to advocate for better infrastructure. So I just wanted to outline 3 points really in favour of the business case, and then a little request at the end. But it's top of the recent released action plan for the Western Bay Infrastructure Forum for a reason. There are 3 big benefits. So firstly, housing. We all know we're desperately short of housing and in crisis. It's already been mentioned that we have the worst housing and rental affordability of any major city in New Zealand. That's actually really, really important to businesses because, of course, they need talent in the future, and we need to be really good at attracting and retaining talent in this area. It's important because, obviously, the economy is growing, but critically, our demographics don't go in our favour too, right? Our ageing population will see much more of a need for us to be able to attract and retain good talent in this region. Unfortunately, high house and rental prices have the opposite effect to that. So we really need to fix that. Otherwise, we'll be in real trouble in 20 or 30 years' time. And I guess despite efforts to intensify and all of the right things being done there and adopt new methods, public and private investment has essentially been stymied in this area by lack of transport infrastructure, which then provides housing land supply. Secondly, industrial land is very important as well. It's kind of the lesser thought of cousin to residential land, but it's equally important. We're equally short on it. And we desperately need additional capacity there. But critically, that provides us with choice and allows us to put the right businesses in the right places to be more productive and to coexist with the residential community better. So we desperately need to have that choice. And also, this particular area happens to be on a key trade route as well. I think it's well been mentioned around the drift south of Auckland into the Waikato, and then the need to move here. So having available industrial and commercial land out in the west is really, really important for us. Lastly, and probably most significantly for New Zealand, is freight, and protecting the Port of Tauranga and its supply routes is critical to Aotearoa New Zealand. A large proportion of our exports, really important as a small island nation. A large amount of our exports go through that port, so mainly primary production, dairy, forestry, horticulture, etc. A number of key imports as well, and that's often overlooked, but fuel, fertiliser, feeds, things like that, so essential for a nation. We all know that the demands on the Port of Tauranga are going to get more and more over the course of time. Auckland isn't going to expand. The industrial base of New Zealand is in the Golden Triangle, so it comes here. We can't let that additional demand happen without the necessary pieces of infrastructure around it. And the majority of the stuff travels by road. We've done a really good job getting things on rail, but it does come by road. So it is really, really essential that we make sure that the roading network has sufficient capacity to achieve that. The last year, Te Waka and ourselves and a bunch of businesses released the Upper North Island Freight Action Plan that outlined for this route, so State Highway 29, an expected increase to freight volumes of 30 to 70% by 2030. So there will be much, much more demand here. And I guess we're making congestion headlines for all of the wrong reasons at the moment. I fear if we leave this, we'll have trucks backed up over the Kaimais, and we do not want to go there for anyone's sake in New Zealand. So really, this is a great case, and well done to the Wakatahi team. I know you cop a lot of stuff, so well done. But it simply needs to be done quickly. 2050 will not cut the mustard. I'm sure there's a bunch of people here that want to be able to cut the ribbon for that. I'm not sure how many will be able to in 2050. So let's make sure we get on with it quickly. John's point was a good one. The city, I often use it, this region has grown 72% since the start of the century. If we were to replicate that by 2050, that's another 150,000 people. But it won't just be us growing. It'll be Hamilton growing at the same rate. It'll be Auckland growing at the same rate. So we really need to get this in place before all of that growth happens. We've been wrong on the downside of every growth forecast I've ever seen, and we just need to get realistic and pragmatic about this type of thing. So, look, removing this choke point is the single investment that unlocks a whole bunch of other ones. There's a bunch of good endeavour from public and private areas. It unlocks everything from housing to green energy to active transport, jobs, manufacturing, export growth, and critically infrastructure resilience. So what I always urge is that this case is adopted and we get on with it as quick as we possibly can. Thank you.
Nigel. Okay, so that brings us to the item in front of us. Now, we probably don't need to have the officials come back and talk us through it. We've each had that. But if you look at the recommendations on page 16, I do just want to draw your attention to B 1, 2, 3, 4, and it should be 5, in that we are stating there in the recommendation that the local authorities and tangata whenua, local authority and tangata whenua are smart growth partners only, because remember, we have central government partners sitting around the table, and it's probably not appropriate that they be voting on those particulars to preserve their independence. Of Western Bay's change to their resolution, could I suggest that in B3 we say support Tauranga City Council's position that there is a strong preference and need for the Tauriko Connections project in bracket State Highway 29, and that then picks up Murray's point. So, are you happy with that? Does that help? Yeah.
Wonderful, and I'm happy to move if that's
Okay,
that's
so
safe.
James is moving. Do I have a seconder? Oh,
Sure,
goodness.
Madam Chair, before you vote, Madam Chair, before you vote.
Yeah, I'll come back to you, Stuart. I'll seconded by Stuart. Jeff, you wanted to speak? Is it Fitty? Oh, sorry.
No, sorry, it's Fitty. It's Fitty, Madam Chair.
Fitty. I can only see the top of your head, Fitty.
No, I'm a bit crook and I'm all knocked up at the moment, so I'm not showing my face.
Okay, understand.
Yeah, I just have a weird problem, just like Makimona. We haven't had our CTWF hui. I hear all the argument and the reasoning, and I agree in principle, but I'm going to have to reserve my vote until we've had our CTWF meeting over this, and I'll make sure that the representatives have canvassed the paper.
Okay, so you're abstaining, are you?
Yes, until we've had this meeting. Like I said, I've read all the material. I'm getting it out to my contacts, put it that way, and I just want to for a bit more comfort for myself, I want to make sure that the CTWF have endorsed this going forward.
Okay, I have a note from Martere Duncan saying that she supports the recommendation. So yeah. We can note your abstention and that the combined tangata whenua haven't met and discussed this, but the tangata whenua members may wish to vote as individuals if they so choose, or they may wish to abstain. Certainly Martere's indicated her agreement.
Yeah, and that's where I think some of us have some exception, because I'm not an individual on here. I represent a whole lot of tangata whenua across the Western Bay.
That's perfectly reasonable. Not a problem at all.
Thank you,
Jeff. You wanted to speak?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Look, I found this whole thing really interesting. I've never experienced a 4-in-1 gig like this before, so it's been really interesting, and I was curious as to how everyone was going to manage it. Well, now I know. I can't see the lady in red. I've enjoyed your commentary today. So, look, I'm not going to abstain. I will be voting to support, particularly conceptually, what's trying to be achieved here. But I'm like many around your table now. It needs to happen, and it needs to happen quickly. From my own point of view, 2050 is definitely far too far away, because I want to see this thing absolutely eventuate. And I'm terribly biased when it comes to the eastern side, of the Bay of Plenty, Paengaroa in those areas, and the quayside development that's happening now. So I want Waka Kotahi to start thinking about that side and how we're going to be prepared to get that all ready. So had that we been talking about that, I'd have been in boots and all. I have to respect Whiti's position, and I do, and but I will be voting to support it. But it could still be subject to what my Tauranga whanaunga have to say. But I already know where most of them are at the moment, particularly from the eastern side. So for me, I say let's get stuck in, get on with it, and let's get this job done. The sooner the better. Kia ora.
Jeff, thank you. Any other speakers? Phil.
Thanks, Chair. And I don't have any particular questions, but I would like to make some comments, and the comments mainly going back in time, because I have to say this, and certainly I've been around the Smart Growth table for a very long time. So this is, from my perspective, quite a significant moment. And last night I still have an office full of Smart Growth papers, and I dug out a presentation I did to the New Zealand Transport Agency Board in 2009 that actually was talking about, at that time, what was called the Tauranga bypass. And then in 2013, in the strategy then, significant focus on the Western Corridor. And in fact, you could actually change the date on the strategy from 2013 to 2023, because it actually distills pretty much the same issues. The only thing that's different is probably the figures in terms of the number of houses and the extent of the business land. And certainly highlighted way back then in terms of limited funding that NZTA had, and highlighted alternative funding sources. So, move forward 10 years and we're still in some of that space. And a lot of good things have been achieved in that interim, but at the end of the day, it comes down to this funding challenge. And I think at that point in time, there are actions around, and it's interesting, identifying a need for a package of interventions as a priority action. So that's 10 years ago. And now in terms of the business case, we have some very clear, well-defined interventions in terms of Highway 2029. I think the other important part of it is the recognition in terms of the interregional significance of Highway 29. And that certainly was highlighted way back all of those years, and particularly in respect to freight, and then the connection of Tauranga with the Upper North Island, and more particularly Hamilton. And now in terms of, we've got the Ruakura Inland Port, and the port here being an integral partner in that. So really keen to see that highlighted, and also acknowledging, and again going back 10 years, the need to separate out local traffic from that interregional activity, including freight. And I'd just like to pick up a point that Margaret made earlier on in terms of roads of national significance, because even back then in 2013, the strategy recognised that there had been a GPS on land transport investment that signalled that the Hamilton to Tauranga route may be considered as a future road of national significance. So I really just wanted to acknowledge a lot of the thinking and commitment that went on way back then, and then a lot of it is relevant now in terms of the situation we're in. So really like to commend the work of the team that developed the business case. It has been a substantial piece of work, long time gestation, but we now have it at the point where we are able to refer it on to the current Waka Kotahi board. So I just wanted to share some of that, Chair, in terms of the journey has been a long one. But as they sometimes say, good things take time.
Just very briefly from me now, despite my personal preference that the business case that Jess outlined adequately covers 3, 4 and 4, ironically it's still 4 and 4, in our recommendations, I at this forum am wearing the hat representing all of my colleagues, so I will be endorsing the recommendations as they were overwhelmingly supported by the Western Bay Plenty Council. Thank you.
I just wanted to add a little bit in after Bill, because I'm relatively new to smart growth. But in 2020, the people sitting around this table, including the Crown, signed off on the Urban Form and Transport Initiative, and then signed off on TSP. And those were designed after lots of discussions, obviously going on over years, to give life, if you like, to this concept of connected centres, which is about communities being built where people can live, work, learn and play with good public transport and multimodal connections. And if you look at that UFTI map, I never know whether to pronounce it UFTI or UFTI, but whatever, if you look at that map, when you look at what was developed and then what was agreed around the table, it does make a lot of sense. When you look at that Western corridor, and we've talked about it, and just as recently as last night to a group of residents, about the opportunities that creates for people to live and work around what is probably one of New Zealand's most significant business estates. And I think with stage 4, it's almost at the stage where it's New Zealand's largest. And that growth up through the Western Corridor enables people to live close to where they're working, close to the schools that their children attend, close to a big shopping centre in the crossing, and then with a good, reliable, efficient public transport spine running up to Te Papa, connecting into the CBD and across to the Mount, and then Starway 2 out to the east, and the Rangiuru business estate, and the development, Don, it will come one day to Tumu. We'll get Wairaki soon. To Tumu might be a bit longer. But that creates the opportunity for those connected centres. But we can't do that without 29, without the separation that Bill talks about, of separating out that interregional travel from the local travel that allows people to develop their housing and also live a good quality life, where they're not sitting like most of us who leave for work 3/4 of an hour before we need to get there, and in some cases even longer. So for me, as a newcomer to smart growth, knowing all that history that Bill's outlined, Waka Kotahi team have done a great job of presenting a business case. It's now up to the leaders sitting up here, and Margaret's made that clear, that we have the job of going down together as a sub-region, putting all of those projects of equal importance, because actually that's what we're sitting around the table saying, they're of equal importance in front of the government. Because as I said earlier, only the central government can make the changes and put the money in to fund this infrastructure. And they could do it in the next budget. They could put a package together in the next budget that funded all the infrastructure and gave certainty to our businesses, to our residents, and to the three councils sitting around the table. So that's the task that this motion in front of us puts on the shoulders of the leaders of this. It's great, and Nigel said it, that we're sitting around the table and we're all in agreement, because if we're not, we haven't got a chance. So I'm happy to speak in support of the motion, and I think the mover of the motion wants a right of reply.
I'll keep it very brief. I firstly endorse what Chair Tolley says. I couldn't have put it better, but I do also want to thank Waka Kotahi, David and Jess. It's quite a tome of work, and as I said before, very comprehensive and persuasive. So I want to thank them and all the team, I'm sure, who are behind them doing all the work in the background. I think it's imperative. This project is imperative for our well-being, particularly economic and social. And I just want to add that I'm proud to support our neighbours in what we both need. So I wish it success at the Waka Kotahi board, and further on when government gets to decide. Thank you.
James, so with that, I'll put the motion that's outlined on page 16. Well, actually, let's do it in two bits. Do we want to do it in two bits, or does the Crown want to resolve from all of it? Okay. Okay, so I'll put the motion then. That's A, B, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 with the changes outlined earlier. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? That's aye, yes. Got that. Thanks, Jeff. Any against? The motion's carried unanimously. Thank you very much, everybody. And I declare the meeting closed at whatever time it is, 4:04. Thank you.